All right. In this video, I want to talk about what we've been seeing around America. Not sure if this is happening around the world, but it's happening on the east and west coast of the United States. We have these shipping crates that are not bringing in their supplies. I'm going to show you a few pictures of this. They're not being allowed to come in, so they're just kind of waiting here. Here's another wider view of another place, and it's stacking up. We got boatloads of shipping crates with supplies that are not coming in. And I want to get into something here in Revelation. Now, in the book of Revelation, it has a repeating kind of process. Like you would have the day-night cycle, and the weekly cycle, the monthly cycle, the yearly cycle. It's circular. It keeps repeating over and over, right? And that's the same way Revelation goes. It doesn't go in a linear path. It goes in a path and then it circles back and it repeats it. And I'm going to explain that a little bit before I get into what I mainly want to get into here. Like we see here in Revelation chapter 2 and 3, it talks about the church. And here at chapter 3 at verse 7, we read about the church of Philadelphia and how there's a door open that no one can shut for Philadelphia. It's the church of brotherly love. It has nothing bad said about it. And then when we go to chapter 4, we read about a door open in heaven and the church is caught up. And through Revelations chapter 4 and 5, we read about the church in heaven. But then when we go to Revelation chapter 12, we see here this whole rapture thing happening again. The woman, being Israel, gives birth to the child, Jesus, the church being his body. And then the child is being the target of the dragon. But the child is caught up to heaven. So then the dragon turns its attention to the woman and her seed, and the woman is Israel, not the church. So we see another depiction of the rapture. It's repeating, and then it shows that there's a war, and after this rapture, the devil and his angels are cast down, probably as some kind of aliens or something. I don't know how they're going to be manifested. And then in Revelation 13, we read about the beast and the false prophet all of a sudden show up, right? But then when we come over to Revelation chapter 16, I'm trying to just go over this quick. We read about 7 angels, each having a vial of the wrath of God. And in chapter 16, we read about all 7 vials being poured out, right? But then all of a sudden, we're talking about the woman on the beast. See how it's like repeating what we read in Revelation chapter 13 here? We're getting a little bit more detail about this beast, right? And then it even repeats and gives more detail about the judgment of the woman. And it talks about the merchants of the earth who act rich through her, right? And a lot of people, even myself, depict this as the Vatican, and for very good reason. But some people are talking about, hey, this sounds like America right now. And I was like, well, it makes sense because America, the United States, is owned by the Vatican. You see, the United States of America is just Washington, D.C. That's all it is, and that's owned by the Vatican. And it has no jurisdiction over the rest of us unless we agree by contract. And we agree by contract through our social security number and our ID, our driver's license. We agree by all these little contracts to be under the jurisdiction of Washington, D.C., which is not the capital of America. It is Philadelphia. And anyway, that shows that the United States, as we see it, would actually be part of Babylon. And it's interesting because it talks about those standing far off see the judgment. And I think it even talks about the ships. And that's what I wanted to find here, because a lot of people were saying maybe this is an event that doesn't happen during the tribulation. This is an event that happens right after the rapture. Because see, the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her. Right? And I want to see, the merchants again made rich by her. Yeah, here we go. And every shipmaster and all the company of ships and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, what city is like unto this great city? Right? And that's where a lot of people are saying, well, maybe this has to do with America, the United States, because we have all these ships off to the side on the east and the west coast. And I was listening to some people talk about Russia and China and how if they launched missiles from their countries, we'd have enough time to notice the missiles and do something about it. But if they were able to come up to the coasts, they'd be able to launch their missiles, and it would take maybe 12 minutes at the most to be able to land wherever they need to land. And that's being generous. And it would take us 8 minutes to realize the missiles have been launched. And that would give us 4 minutes to actually do anything about it, which is not enough time to do anything about it. And with all these ships being off the coast on the east and the west, guess what? This is perfect camouflage. Perfect camouflage for enemy ships to come in disguised as shipping crates to hide amongst these, but really have missiles upon them. It also is perfect camouflage in radar if you have nuclear submarines coming in. The radar is going to have trouble with all these ships going on to really identify what's going on. Alright? So, give me a second here. Ooh. Anyway, so a lot of that's starting to make sense with all these ships just sitting out there for seemingly no good reason. It's might as well save the supplies, right? Because they're just going to destroy this nation anyway. Might as well not destroy all these goods. Let them use up the goods that they do have and build up the camouflage here. And then you can launch the attack. And that seems to make sense. It seems to make a whole lot of sense. So I just wanted to make this video to show this. And it's interesting because it says that this woman rides the beast, and then the beast gets upset at this woman and destroys her. And this woman's a harlot. I was thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? It makes even more sense because America rides the UN, takes main control, and the rest of the nations are getting sick of that she's riding the beast and has control of the beast. And she's a harlot because America is supposed to be a Christian nation, but she's turned on God, right? And she's gone her own way, prosperity gospel, become Laodicean, and not only that, but we're not just a Christian nation anymore, we're a Jewish nation, a Muslim nation, an atheist nation, a Buddhist nation, and all this, whatever Obama said, and we're mingling in with all kinds of other things. a communist nation. So we've become a harlot. And just like it says about this Babylon, where she's like never going to be a widow, this Laodicean church right here says, because thou sayest, I am rich and increased with goods and have needed nothing, and knowest not that thou art wretched, miserable, and poor, blind, and naked. And that represents America. How does it not? We think that we're rich, increased with goods, and have needed nothing, but we don't realize that we're wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. You see, we're naked because we don't have the righteousness of God. We got our own righteousness. We think that we're being blessed financially because God's with us, but that's not the case. You see, we're blind, and the riches are to keep us blind, thinking that we can keep going the way we're going, because why would God let us just stay rich and get richer if we weren't in his favor? But you see, that's part of the deception. And then you think everything's fine, but Jesus says, I spit you out of my mouth, and I'm on the outside knocking for any individual who will open the door to me. So he's saying he's not in us and we're not in him. You know, there's a Laodicean church here, which can represent the United States. And just like going back over here, that's what we see here. The same church thinks she's never going to be a widow. She's got all this abundance. And it's interesting here, the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Those represents, like it says here, devils, demons. The birds, the different unclean, foul, unclean birds represent the spiritual devils and demons. And that's what we see through our media, through the television, the movies, is just full of this stuff and full of these pedophiles and pornography. It's just loaded with this stuff. And like I said, the more I was looking at it, I was like, the more it makes sense. It reminds me of some of the Prophecy Club stuff that they would put out through the 90s, I think even into the 80s. 80s and 90s, they had these Prophecy Club videos talking about people saying that America is going to be destroyed by a bunch of bombs and what seemed to be nukes. People have been seeing visions of it and dreaming about it. And I was like, oh, you know, maybe, but you know, I don't put too much into what people say they dream about, because it can be an interpretation for that individual alone. Like, it means something to them. They just need to figure it out. And but now I was thinking, you know what, maybe it is the United States here. And that great city, I would imagine, is Washington, D.C., and it's going to be destroyed. And the last thing I would like to say before I end this is, it makes a whole lot of sense, because what we see with the left in this communist agenda, the more atheistic, godless, liberal side, where they are all built up on the East Coast and the West Coast. And it's more into the mainland, inland, where it's more Christian and more conservative. I'm not saying the conservatives are perfect and right and just, but the left is just batshit crazy and gone off the deep end. And they're in the support of all kinds of ungodly things. And they're being built up on the coast, right where everything's going to be destroyed, the east and west coast. And because of what's going on with this thing going on around the world, which I can't say because my video will be flagged to take it down, people are moving away from the coast, except for mainly Florida. A lot of people are moving into the more conservative states, trying to get away from the bullshit on the coast. So the coasts are just ram-packed full of ungodly people who have been warned many times, and God still has his people on the coast there warning people. So it makes sense that there would be a rapture. And just like in the days of Lot, because a lot of these places are hardcore, like Sodom and Gomorrah, very perverse. And when Lot was taken out of Sodom, it rained fire, and there'd be a rapture. And some of the godly people that are there, or all the godly people that are there, are going to be taken up. And then, all of a sudden, these missiles are going to be coming up and destroying the coasts, the big cities there. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah, just like the days of Lot. Everything's going as normal for the most part here. Nobody's expecting anything. Peace and safety, and then sudden destruction. It's all being set up. And it reminds me of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Jesus says, when you see the desolation and abomination spoken of in Daniel, you need to get out of Jerusalem. And what happened in 70 AD is Rome surrounded Jerusalem to besiege it, where they don't let the supplies into Jerusalem. Just kind of like we see a blockade right here. And it was to starve them out. And the thing is that they were ready to go. But I think something happened with the emperor where he got sick, he died, something happened. So for 5 months, the soldiers were just kind of chilling out, surrounded Jerusalem. And the Christians could see that, and they got out of Jerusalem. They had time to leave because they weren't being really held down yet. But then when they got things figured out, they besieged, blockaded, didn't let the supplies in, let Jerusalem starve for a while, and then in their weakened condition, they came in and they attacked and destroyed Jerusalem and destroyed the temple where not even one stone was left upon another. They just completely leveled it, flattened it out. And we see history repeating itself right here. It's happening. So thanks for watching, and take care.